What if I were to ask all of you, being emotional can actually be your superpower? The very thing that you have been told to hide can actually make you unstoppable and stronger than anyone else. When I look at my children, I'm often reminded of something. Perhaps you all know that, but have forgotten. The very first language of our connection was emotion, isn't it? That smile, that hug, that voice, it gave us that comfort. It gave us that you belong here. But over the years, as we grew, things started changing. It started having different meaning. We learned, or perhaps we have been conditioned, that emotions are to be hidden. And we need to not process and understand emotion. I still remember years back, I was been denied promotion. And you know what was the reason cited? I was too emotional. And me, being me, I went in and I was like, I don't agree with it. And I raised my concern and I was like, Pooja, you're too overreacting. Calm down. When I got a bold idea on the table, I was like, Pooja, again, you are being too emotional about it. Just calm down and relax. So, being emotional, can it be really deterrent to success? I've had my own series of experience being myself and later on as coaching as well. But before I deep dive into my own experience, let me tell you, it's just not me. It's even the research which proves that. The study by Leadership Quarterly Journal in 2016 found that the gender stereotype emotional barrier is real. Men and women, though they are equal on performance, but the evaluation would differ because of the belief that women are too emotional. So it affects their competence evaluation in terms of leadership and potential. Later, fast forward, when I was been promoted, and yay, I was so excited. Finally, I got it my promotion. And I was stepping in to be the youngest HR head in big MNC. And before even I could sink in that promotion on the first day, I had a colleague, a senior colleague, coming in to telling me, Pooja, now that you have become an HR head, don't be so emotional, don't laugh and joke around, otherwise, people would not take you seriously. While that was sinking in, but months later, the results spoke, the impact was been felt. And this time I heard another voice. Pooja, don't carry your emotional HR hat every now and then. And that night, when I went back home, I looked at myself. That reflection, it was just not of a youngest HR head. It was not of all that accomplishment. It was just me, Pooja, looking through that reflection and feeling deeply. Who am I if I cut the cords with this emotion? Am I being authentic to myself? Can I lead, connect, inspire if I can't feel? And it was not only me who felt so. Now, when I coach, I do feel that people are always in this dilemma. So, what do we do with emotions? Are they trapped? Should we not consider them? Based on my experience, I have learned emotions are not deterrent to success. It is the untrained emotions. It is when you get into that emotional hijack, when you feel there's an emotional tsunami, there's an emotional flood, you have stuck in. But what is this emotional flood, emotional tsunami? What do I mean about it? The emotional flood happens in when your heart races in, when the stress body response. It just surges up. Just think of a thermometer spike. That's how it spikes up. And when your logical brain shuts down sideways, it goes sideways, and you become your emotion. That's when you are in that emotional flood. And that can be the deterrent of the success. Because we all know, or you would have heard, you would have read, that women score a little higher on emotional intelligence. Isn't it? But in spite of scoring a little higher on emotional intelligence, why the same thing goes against them? Because our emotions are not trained. We are in an emotional hijack. So there's time to move from emotional flood to emotional flex. What do I mean by that? From emotional flood to emotional flex is when you are able to understand your emotion. Remember of thermometer? You are no longer a thermometer spike, but you become a thermostat. In that situation, you become the driver of your emotion. You respond very intentionally, understanding and processing each emotion. What happens if we stay in that emotional flood? We would lose confidence, clarity, courage, and every outer noise will become our inner voice. So it's very important to move from emotional flood to emotional flex. But how do we do so? So, what I have discovered and what has helped me is the 3P, which I call it as a secret sauce of leadership. Because we all are leaders in every space of our life, in every role we play. So, what are those 3Ps? Let's deep dive into this. The first one is pause. Pause in for 5 to 10 seconds. Because the moment you pause in, that pause, it creates the possibility. That space gives you the time to calm down, to center in, to slowly come in that thermostat. And once you pause in, then you start processing it. Because it's very important to understand your emotions. They are not roadblocks, they are path pavers. And you remember, it's the untrained emotion which actually gets us in that emotional tsunami. So we need to process and understand each emotion. For example, frustration is trying to tell us that we have outgrown that space. Anger is trying to tell us the boundaries have been crossed. Fear brings in that paralysis of decision. When shame comes in and which it's not processed, it will lead further into self-doubt. It tells us that we need to embrace that confidence. And when we are able to understand and process this emotion, that's when we are able to flex in our emotions. And then comes the third step, which the world sees in. You remember when you get angry and people are like, nowadays, mommy is always angry. Oh, she's emotional. She's hypersensitive. Don't touch her. Because people see outwardly what we pivot. So once you are able to pause, process, and then comes in pivot, what happens is when you are in that emotional situation, you actually ask, from where is it coming in? Is it going to lead me to my end outcome? And when you process, pivot, that's when you move into the emotional flex. And it's important for us to change the narrative because we have been taught that being emotional is not powerful. Being emotional less is strength. No, it's time to change the narrative because leaders can't lead if they are not authentic. They don't command, they connect. And can you connect if you're afraid of your own emotions? I couldn't. Because that's when you're entering into the people pleasing stage. But the moment you are able to connect with your emotions, you are able to draw the boundaries, you are no longer a yes person, you are much at peace. Being emotional the trained emotion is not a softness. It is important in leadership. It is contextual in leadership. Connection, it is just not a strategy. It is the need. It is every day what you display your emotions. So next time, if someone tells you that you're too emotional, time to pause, process, and pivot. Remember, you are not broken. You may be just hit in that emotional tsunami. So important to take a step forward and understand that you have the power only when you understand, only when you connect yourself authentically. That's when the real magic would happen in every space and in every role you play. So today, I want to invite all of you to this possibility. What possibilities would open up for you when you move in from emotional flood to emotional flex? How you would become unstoppable, how you would be the driver of your life. Thank you so much.